Annie Bird, human rights groups, including yours, Rights Watch, allege that General Otto Perez Molina, now a leading presidential candidate in Guatemala, was directly involved in the systematic use of torture and acts of genocide during these years. For television and online viewers, we want to warn you we're playing graphic footage taken while Molina was in command of the Ixil Triangle in 1982, where there was a village massacre campaign. The video shows then Major Perez Molina being interviewed by journalist Alan Nairn, while the battered bodies of several prisoners lie nearby on the ground. Although Perez Molina was using a different name, he seems identifiable by his voice and by his features. Annie Bird, can you talk about this?
Yes. Perez Molina is the leading presidential candidate for the election scheduled to be held September 11th. Very little is known in Guatemala about his past in the Army. There's been very little discussion in the press. Of course, he runs as a general, as a former general, and is known to have been, of course, in the war. But the reality is that he is very well known in the Ixil area, very much identified by people there as having been a commanding officer in the region. In Quiché, in that area, almost half of the massacres during the genocide occurred in that area, over 300 massacres. And in the video footage, this man that identified himself as Tito Arias, but that's known to be the nom de guerre of Otto Perez Molina, is seen over the dead bodies of 4 prisoners that the soldiers under his command told the journalists that they had captured alive and brought in and were interrogated and killed, which was standard practice. There were virtually no official prisoners of war during the war in Guatemala.
And the role of the United States at this time, this was during the years of President Reagan, in supporting the Guatemalan military and training the G2 and those that were killing the civilians.
Right. There was strong, really unquestioned support of the Guatemalan military by the United States. Consistently, since the U.S.-backed coup in 1954 and through this series of military dictators that ruled the country, since then and throughout the war, enjoyed strong backing of the United States. And actually, in President Bill Clinton, when he visited Guatemala when he was president, apologized for the U.S. Role in supporting the military during the genocide in Guatemala, which we find actually very concerning, given that Hillary Clinton again visited Guatemala. She'd been along on that trip earlier this year in June, and a situation in support of the Carsi Initiative and a big growth of U.S. investment in security initiatives in the region and military support of the military and the police at a time when there's growing abuses, particularly in Honduras. And during her trip to Guatemala, she promised $40 million in security assistance to Honduras in a government implicated in gross human rights violations. So it's concerning that the U.S. policy in Central America doesn't seem to be changing.
Let me try Ramon Cadena again in Guatemala City. We'll see if your phone line is improved. If Molina were to become the president, we see this man who is standing over the dead bodies back in the early 1980s. What would it mean for these trials?
Well, I think that definitely if he gets into the executive branch as president, he will, and also other ministers will be blocking or trying to block some of the cases. As a matter of fact, right now, there is a case, the Bamaca case. It's a guerrilla man that was detained and then disappeared and probably killed, and everything points out at Molina at Perez Molina as one of the executors. And the case has been blocked by the constitutional courts right now.
You're
because there is a
ruling
ruling
of Bamako, who is the husband of the American lawyer Jennifer Harbury.
Yes, exactly. She has been fighting for this case against the impunity, but it has been impossible, and the Constitutional Court is right now blocking this case. So I think if he gets into power, definitely the cases will be affected, and we have heard that he wants to change the Attorney General that is right now appointed. So it would be very negative for justice.
And Ramon Cadena, these are trials of soldiers, and they are getting many years in prison, thousands of years in prison. What about the United States?
Just, I want to explain that the judges, first of all, they said that they wanted to give all these years for each person that was killed, but the years that they will be legally in jail are 50 years. But this is just a symbolic ruling. Now, yes, the United States, I think there should be an investigation regarding the involvement of the United States in all these massacres. And we hope that once the case of genocide advances, there will be a possibility of pointing out that other actors, such as the case of the United States, who was deeply involved in these cases.
I wanted to go to one last clip, and this was of a soldier. After the 4 soldiers were sentenced Tuesday, one of the convicted officers said he felt no regret for what he had done.
No me arrepiento.
I don't regret anything, because due to the noble institution I belong to, and continue to belong to, because it's in my veins, the Guatemalan Army, I don't mind taking the blame for you. I don't care, because I know there will always be a soldier at the 4 cardinal points looking after Guatemalans, as I did myself. All my colleagues who have died during the war, who were there to defend Guatemala, so that Guatemala is what it is now. I think if this is the payment I need to make, I accept it kindly.
He is making an important point here, Annie Bird. He says he was part of the Guatemalan Army, and he did it for that. In fact, that is true. Isn't that right?
That is exactly true. And he also made another good point in that he played an important role and the Guatemalan Army played an important role in making Guatemala what it is today. And Guatemala has one of the highest murder rates in the world. The levels of violence have increased. There are at higher levels of violence of killing than during many of the years of the armed conflict. And that's, because of organized crime, drug trafficking, the war against drug. And the fact of the matter is that many of the military networks during the war were involved in organized crime activities as death squads, as involved in drug trafficking and car thieving networks and whatnot. And those networks continued to operate today in Guatemala, and they place people within the justice system. These networks control courts, control sections of the Attorney General's office, and so people in Guatemala have been in a really difficult struggle over, over 20 years to try to bring the Guatemalan justice system to a point where it can undertake these trials, because the networks of organized crime that have influence within the justice system use that influence to illegally block justice. And so last year, for example, there was an Attorney General named with strong ties to organized crime, and after 6 months of really important struggle, they finally had a very good Attorney General named who's moved on cases like these. And those are important advances and are necessary not just for trying crimes of the past, but for ending the violence that today Guatemalans suffer.
I want to thank you both for being with us. Annie Bird, co-director of Rights Action, and Ramon Cadena joining us from Guatemala City in Guatemala, the ad hoc judge who heard the Las Doceras massacre case for the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.